One to the profitability webinar. My name is Mike, and with me is
Will Pierce.
and today we're going to talk about profitability. So, as per
Yep.
the norm, I know I said this already in the pre-chat, but if you have any questions, comments, concerns, threats, or promises, throw them in the question area. We'll try and make this as amusing or as interesting as possible. And again, we will have a post email going out in a day or two with notes. So, Will, why don't you go ahead and start us off?
Yeah, absolutely. Mike, can you advance the slide for me here?
Of
Since
course.
you are in the driver's seat, I do believe there.
Mm-hmm.
So we are going to kick this off with what everybody initially thinks about when they think about their profitability, which is your revenues and your costs. Now, you think of yourself as the driver of your agency, but your clients and your employees are the passengers along for the ride, and they're helping you get to whatever your end destination is. We all know in this industry, you can have some bumpy revenue month to month. Nothing's ever the same, and nothing is guaranteed. So with that being said, you really need to make your costs visible. And, my recommendation would be, Mike, feel free to correct me if you view differently, but the first thing I would do is break everything out in some sort of graph or a chart, whether that's, a pie chart, a bar graph, however you like to look at that. And, my starting point anyways would always be your fixed costs. So what are the things for you that are going to be the same month to month? Probably your building rent, your employees' salaries if you do have any employees. And then from there, build off the things that are going to change month to month, your electrical bill for your building, all those kinds of good things. I would definitely make that my personal starting point.
I'll say absolutely. And the question always comes up with agents, well, do I need to grow my business? Besides volume, what about employees or other agents and such? Well, the challenge there is there's no right or wrong way to do that. In fact, we've seen very small agencies, one person or one agent shows that are very, very profitable because they have very low overhead, which means it drives their profitability. Now, the downside, of course, is that all the work is on you. So all the back end work, all the book of business cleansing, all that, the calculations, all that stuff is on your shoulders. There are other agencies that decide to grow, add either office personnel or they add more agents, and they may have higher volume, but that does reduce their profitability. When you start getting a storefront office, you have much higher rent and much higher expenses, and you have employees, you have payroll. So if you think the only way to grow is to simply grow a number of people, that is actually wrong. It's just a matter of how you are looking to grow. Because when you grow to an office space and you have all these expenses, you have to realize, oh my gosh, I need to cover that. And you have to get really good at your numbers, like Will's talking about, to make sure you're not just dumping it all out the door in expenses and not profitability.
Yeah, that's a great point, and that's something a lot of people overlook is what is that threshold as to where you can comfortably take that next step and get an office building, get that next staff member. A lot of metrics that you look at say $150,000 of gross income per full-time equivalent employee. That means that, depending on what your overhead cost is, how much you have to pay Uncle Sam at the end of the year, you need to be looking at right around that threshold. Some people are comfortable with less. Some people want their margins to be a little bit higher, so they want to look at more. But that's where a lot of the metrics really advise your average point to be looking at. So whatever you're comfortable with, but you need to make sure that all the mandatory bills are paid month to month and at the end of the year.
Yeah, I would also recommend, I don't know how everyone is on doing their taxes. I know Will is not a tax advisor, nor am I. I have a CPA I use. So I highly recommend using a CPA. Just like you expect your clients to use an insurance agent to enroll into their healthcare costs, I want to use a specialist when it comes to my taxes to make sure I'm doing everything right, because it can be very costly if you do it wrong,
Yeah.
especially if you file wrong in the next year. They will get their money out of you. I know it's hard to believe,
Yep.
but the IRS
They
is not
will always
worth it.
eventually get their money.
Yes, they can get blood from a turnip, amazingly. So make sure that you are, seek the advice of a professional on what you can expense, what you can't. If you do decide to go the employer route, do you do someone that's maybe a virtual assistant that you 1099 them at the end of the year, or do you actually hire someone and start a payroll process? This is all important information to talk to your CPA about. So seek out just like you tell your clients, seek out the advice of professionals for your business to make sure you're doing it right.
Yeah, absolutely. Good to go to the next one there.
Yes. And then, of course, next we have money management, my worst topic.
Yeah, everybody's least favorite thing, probably dating back to if you had to take, a money management 101 class like I know we had to in high school, covering all the basics of even how to write a check properly so that it goes through and clears the bank just fine. The first talking point there that I want to cover that nobody really likes to hear, but you need to have plenty of money on hand. The minimum, that again, not a personal financial advisor, but 3 months of working capital is going to be a pretty good starting point. You never know what's going to come up, whether it's a repair that needs to be done to your office space. Maybe you need a new laptop or a new tablet, or something goes wrong and you have to fix and replace something. That extra working capital is a great thing to have on hand. And not even just that, but slow months. Maybe you have, a month where you didn't get as many referrals as you would have liked, or just a market cycle where not a whole lot of people needed to change plans that year. Maybe it was a maintenance year, and so therefore you didn't have a whole lot of new influx of business coming in. There's a lot of things that can go into it that you need to have working capital on hand for.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the show called The Profit. It's on CNBC with Marco Simonis. I think that's how you say his name, but I'm not sure if you've ever seen the show. It's like every other reality show. You have a professional comes into a dying business. They argue for a little bit. They turn around and they all sing Kumbaya at the end. But he comes in, and I think one of the things that I've learned from that show is that he says people, process, and product. You have the right people, the right process, the right product. Now, obviously, for product, we pretty much have what we have. Do you have the right people in place, whether that's yourself, and what's your process? So it's funny how he comes in, and it's like these companies might have really high revenue, but then you flip over to their debts and their expenses, and it like completely wipes all that out. So he's like, yeah, you had $1 million in sales, but you've got $1.1 million in expenses and debt. So you're actually negative $100,000. So I know that magic number, ooh, I want to make $1 million, but if it takes over $1 million to get there, that's not good. As opposed to somebody that only had $100,000 in sales, but had made $85,000. Which book would you rather be in? Negative $100,000 with big books to show for it, or small books with high profitability? And for me, all day long, I'd rather have high profitability than just big numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. Hands down. No question on that one.
Yeah, so if you get a chance to watch that show, check it out. It's, of course, a little cheesy like every reality show, but it is interesting to hear the advice he gives to small business owners. He never does an insurance agent. I don't know why. I mean, I'm sure there's some that can use it as advice, but it's always good to take those little nuggets that he gives to business owners that we can adapt to our own businesses. Now, next up, I think this is a big one that we need to really focus on, especially AP coming up, is new client acquisition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll backtrack for for 2 seconds. It kind of feeds into the same topic, but our last bullet point on that cash management slide was going to be your profitability per client. There's a lot of factors that go into that. How long is your average client on the books for? How many, and we'll cover a little bit more of this later, so just kind of a little teaser on it at the beginning, but how many products do you have per client? There's a lot that really goes into that, and the more you maximize that number, as he was talking about, the higher your true revenue is going to be with fewer expenses. Because if we bounce over to the next slide, when we're looking at client acquisition and growth, it can be 5 times more expensive to acquire a new client than to keep an existing one. Now, you might think, well, it doesn't cost me hardly anything in the grand scheme of what I make on commissions on that client. But if you have to keep washing and rinsing that cycle over and over and over again for every client you get, you're not really going to be that profitable come the end of the day. So don't ever take for granted your current clients. Keep them on the books as much as possible. Look at what your cost per client acquisition truly is. Do you get a lot of referrals off of your billboard? Well, if you get 5 referrals a month and that billboard's costing you $900 a month, take a look at if you feel like that truly is worth it to keep going. And that goes for all of your types of marketing as well.
Yeah, because you have to remember, production does not equal profit. Like Will said, if you buy a $2,000 lead campaign and you get 3 sales from it and an average of $400 a sale, you made $1,200, but it costs you $2,000 to get there. That doesn't correlate well for paying the bills. So you need to make sure that you're tracking your CPA, or cost per acquisition. If you ever want to sell your book of business and retire, like your clients do, you need to know these numbers. There are a lot of things that, go into selling a book of business that I think a lot of agents don't take into consideration, which we'll talk about here next slide actually. But
Mhm.
if you don't have any idea what it costs to acquire a client, I can tell you you're going to be in trouble. I know call centers track this religiously. In fact, most call
Yeah.
centers have about a 2-year cycle before they see a profit on a client, because they have
Mhm.
so much expenses, not only internally with staff and technology, but also with marketing costs, websites, Joe Namath costs a lot of money to be on air. So even though it might be questionable call center, they still have a lot of expenses. Not to say that that place is, I don't know who it is, but point is, if you don't know how profitable they are and you start losing clients earlier and earlier, you may
Mhm.
be more flushing more money down the drain than you realize.
Yeah, and you'll hear us preach about ancillary products all of the time, but this is where it can really come into play. Is we all want to focus on our main driving sales, our Medicare supplements and our Medicare Advantage plans, but those ancillary products can help increase and improve that profitability just ever so slightly more per client and make them more profitable for you. We were talking a little bit about marketing. I want to segue that into push versus pull marketing. Now, you might look at that and say, what in the heck are you guys talking about? Great question. So your push marketing is going to be kind of what we all think traditionally about when it comes to client acquisition, buying your leads, radio ads, television ads, newspaper ads, those sort of things, direct mailers. They're going to be a lot higher in your initial upfront cost. Now, on the flip side, your pull marketing is going to be really heavily on your time investment. So you really got to kind of factor which one is more important and how much legwork you're really willing to do. Man, if I could get a sentence out, that would be phenomenal here. Your pull marketing is going to be your blogs, your social media, going to networking events, getting your name recognition really out there. Now, I will say this, and I'm sure Mike will agree with me. If you start a social media page or you start a blog, don't stop. You can't, if you start that and then give up and quit doing it, it's going to look worse than if you had never even started doing so.
Yeah, that's very true. And the other side of that is you need to treat yourself like an employee when it comes to all these marketing costs. And what I mean by that, if you are just spending money and having no accountability for it, it's easy to just keep on doing it. But if you think to yourself, if I was paying an insurance agent 50, 70, $100,000 a year and they weren't producing, but yet they have all these expenses, you'd be asking them what's going on. I gave you a credit card for marketing, you maxed it out in 2 months. Where's the revenue to offset those expenses? You'd be questioning them left and right. So you need to treat yourself the same way. In fact, this is one of the takeaways that I had when I left the captive world, was to hold yourself accountable for all these things. And, every Monday or every once a month, sit down and go do a quick book review, meaning book review as in look at your book of business, look at your expenses and what worked, what didn't, almost have a meeting with yourself on what you're going to do the following month or following quarter, however, whatever frequency you're meeting yourself with. So the more you hold yourself accountable like you would an employee, the more successful you will be.
Yeah, and not only hold yourself accountable, but hold your brand accountable. What do you want people to think of when they think of your brand? I know I can include my grandparents in this category. They use their cell phones about as much as a teenager would. They are on them all of the time. Your website needs, everything needs to be mobile ready. Your brand needs to be easily accessible to them and easily viewed. So hold your brand and your name to that same accountability as you do your production and yourself.
Yeah, and I think that's part of, there's There's a great saying in advertising and business in general. If you can be clever or clear, always be clear. And this goes back
Mhm.
to the elevator pitches. And some people can pull it off. I never could. When people say, "Well, I help seniors, make educated healthcare decisions for the best lives possible," I'm like, I don't know what that means. Just tell me you're an insurance agent. Just tell me you sell
Yeah.
Medicare insurance. That's clear. That tells me, okay, I know what's
Hmm.
happening. If you can, because confused minds don't buy. So always be clear.
Correct.
And confused minds don't inquisitive. If I look at a solicitation and I don't know what it's saying, throw it out because I got stuff to do. I don't want to go to internet, figure out what it is. Oh, okay, that's what it is. I'm not interested. End. So it's kind of like those perfume commercials where they have like an arbitrary model, and all of a sudden a perfume bottle pops up, and you're like, what on earth was that? So same thing.
I'll
Don't
play
confuse
devil's
your
advocate.
clients.
Oh, I'll play devil's advocate on that for a second. A confused mind
Mhm.
might buy. A client could easily get confused, get turned around, and end up buying. But that's how complaints start, and that's how bad practices really get going. So a little bit of devil's advocate there to what Mike was saying. A confused mind can definitely buy, but it's not what you want. You don't want someone that is going to have that make that phone call of I did not know I was enrolling into this plan, and then have that be tied back to you. That is every agent's absolute one of their absolute worst nightmares, I should say.
Yeah, that and spiders. So next up, and speaking of, if you ever want to retire, we got to look at your book of business because
Mm-hmm.
this is your business. This is where rubber meets the road. This is your basically your worth as a client or as a client, excuse me, as a
Yep.
business owner because this is your business.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I hinted at it earlier, but your retention rates are going to be a massive factor in how profitable are you. Does your average client only stay on the books for 2 years? You're probably not really eating back that acquisition cost very much. Whereas if you have a client that stays on for 5 to 6 years, you're really making your money back on your acquisition cost and hopefully getting some referrals from them during that time frame. Now, within your retention, one of the easiest things you can do to improve that is add additional policies per client. It's going to be a lot harder for them to ever shop around and to leave you if they have everything under your roof. I know for us, our homeowners insurance and both of mine and my wife's car insurance are with the same person. He's got all of our stuff. And, as long as our rates stay competitive and we shop, the service has been great, odds are I'm not going anywhere, and he probably knows that. So if you've got your clients with the MedSup and their ancillary products, life insurance, whole 9 yards through you, or even just a couple, that's a loyal client, and loyal clients are profitable.
Yeah, think of it like this. Let's say you were in the market to buy a new car and you're just in passing conversation with some friends and someone says, "Oh, I have a coworker who wants to sell their car. It's $20,000." You'd be like, "Great, tell me about it." Like, what's $20,000? Do you want it or not? And you'd be like, "Well, I need to know a lot more information than that before I fork over $20,000. And what's a year, make,
Yep.
model, mileage? What options does it
Mm-hmm.
have? Is it in good condition?" I mean, a whole list of things you want to know before you even consider purchasing that car. That's what happens when you say, "I want to sell my book of business," because there are companies out there that will buy your book of business, but they're going to pick it
Mm-hmm.
apart. They're going to look at how many
Yes.
active policyholders do you have? What is the average? What is the average
Age, I
age?
think, is what you're going for there.
Yeah, average age of not only the not your client, but the average age of the policy, because most people
Mm-hmm.
know that buy books of business that 5 years is about the average lifespan of an MA plan for a client. So if all your clients have had MA plans for about 4 years, they can predict that there's going to be a big turn in your book of business, and that's going to greatly devalue it. How many policies per client? If you've got one policy per client, that's a real strong book of business. If you have 4 or 5 policies per client, that's going to give your book of business that much more worth. They're going to pick apart your book of business because if you're going to overanalyze a car for $20,000, they're going to really overanalyze a book of business that you want 100, 200, $300,000 for. And if
Mm-hmm.
you can't give them accurate numbers or a decent layout, they're going to be like, "Well, I'll give you 10 grand for your book of business." You're like, "But I make all this money off it." Yeah, but that is not guaranteed revenue, and we don't know what we're buying. So if you
Right.
think you're sitting on a gold mine of clients, but you can't provide any of this information, you're really just sitting on a bunch of people. That's it. You might as well just buy a phone book and start calling it.
Yeah, and your organization as an agent is going to be a huge factor in how well that really moves forward. If you are looking at that, or as you are keeping tabs on this, if you've got all of your clients' files super handy in your CRM, you know what policies they have, you know where your opportunities lay then within that. If you have 5 filing cabinets in your basement or in your back room and nothing's even alphabetized or sorted by carrier, you're going to have a nightmare of a time trying to find your cross-selling opportunities. So organization, 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 and a really easy way to stay on top of that is your communication to your clients. You'll hear us say it all of the time, minimum of 7 touch points a year. I know that initially sounds like a lot, but it's really not. You've got 4 quarters, quarterly newsletters take care of 4 of those. Their birthday, there's 5. I'm sure you can come up with 2 more times to call, email, contact your clients throughout the year, whether it's a holiday card with, nice picture of you and your family on it or something like that. But that minimum of 7 touch points a year will help you keep finding your opportunities to improve not only your organization, your retention, and your policies for a client right there.
Yeah, and he nailed it right there, saying product density creates client stickiness. Meaning
Mm-hmm.
it's just like the Progressive commercials where they show the house, then the car, then the motorcycle, then the jet ski, then the
Yeah.
boat, and then pet insurance even. The more
Mm-hmm.
policies you have with somebody, the more challenging it is to leave because and I got to roll over everything. I got to go outside and look up all my VIN numbers.
Yep.
Forget it. I've got, the new Top Gear's on. I need to watch that. And, I got other things to do with my life than buy insurance. So if you want your clients to be bouncing all over the place, then simply sell them insurance and move on. But the ones that have the
Yep.
greatest retention are the ones that are most organized and keeping contact with them as well. I
Mm-hmm.
will say one of the big things, I'd say raise your hand. You can click the thing, but I would say type in yes if you're using some type of CRM, because that is a
Yeah.
game changer. It's 2021. We're pushing to 2022 basically with AEP coming up. I would say that's one of the
Mm-hmm.
biggest differentiators between I see a successful agency and a struggling agency is using effectively a CRM. And yes, there are a little bit of investment. I know Agency Block is a popular one. I think it's like $65 a month for one
Mm-hmm.
user. But you figure, okay, that's going to cost you what, $800 a year, give or take. But if it saves you 4 policies and gains you 2 additional referrals because you're using it to its full advantage, it just paid for itself and then some. And then when you go to sell
Yep.
your book of business, guess what? Everything's organized. Because let's face it, every old lady, no offense to anyone, old ladies, but after you talk to 30 of them, you can't remember which Myrtle's which Myrtle. Did you have the big dog or the little dog? Were you blue hair or green hair? I don't remember because I talk to so many people every day. So having a CRM will help you retain that relationship because when Myrtle calls you, oh yeah, this is the Myrtle with the small dog, with the questionable cookies and the bad coffee, but I still like her because she's a client. So you're not going to tell her that she has bad coffee, but now she's going to remember, oh yeah, you remembered my dog Spot. I like that you remembered that. Here's my friend's name to call. If you don't remember who they are, confuse them, that's that's hard to come back from on a phone call, and that can leave a very bad taste in their mouth.
Yeah, definitely. And, within being organized and remembering their dog's names or their grandchildren's name or anything like that, that opens a phenomenal door to ask for reviews, ask for feedback from them. If they've been a client for a long time, you've absolutely earned that right to ask. The worst thing they could possibly say is, I don't really feel like giving you a review right now, or not today. If they've been your client for a long time, odds are they're not going to say terrible things about you. So you've earned that right to ask, and asking that is also how you get more referrals. And we will preach referrals till everybody is blue in the face here.
Yes. Now going back to growth, and I'm sure it might be a question back in your mind or front of your mind for this webinar is, okay, so how do I grow? What's my next step? I can tell you if you're a one person or a small agency, using the CRM to its full advantage, that CRM could literally take the place or be some sort of administrative assistant to you because a lot of
Yeah.
these CRMs have automated processes. You put a new client, you say, do this, and it automatically sends out communications to them on a basis that you deemed. So it could send them out a 30-day email saying, hey, just checking up, make sure you got your cards. If you haven't, call me. Otherwise, enjoy your new policy. That can be automated. So you don't have to worry about doing it 30 days later. It could send out annual reviews or a reminder for annual reviews every late September, because guess what happens in October? AEP. So you can start start tempting the waters or planting those seeds for AEP automatically with your CRM. So literally your CRM could be either your admin assistant or another admin assistant without the overhead of having to hire somebody and do benefits or worry about them calling sick or forgetting to do something. It's an automated process. So start looking into those. If you have a CRM, making sure that you're using all the benefits and features of that CRM as well.
And that automated process makes your 7 touch points really easy as well.
Yeah.
So
I will say this, if you're thinking about your competition, I know there are a lot of captive agents that are required to do 30, 60, 90 checkpoints with new clients. And they actually have to call a certain number that logs that call so upper management can see that that's happening. Because that's one difference between captive and independent agents is captive agents have this hierarchy that holds them accountable. And if they're having a bad week or not following protocols, they get called out. As opposed to independent agents, we're very forgiving of ourselves. Oh, I had a bad week. It's okay. I deserve that round of golf on Saturday. Rather than prospect because I slacked off all week, I'll think about it while I'm on the golf course or while I'm laying on the pool or whatever I'm doing with that weekend that I should be catching up or should be planning to do better. I can really slack off. And that's where we see that slippery slope of agents failing, is because the accountability isn't there. I'll get my high horse now. So another big thing, and and this leads right into using your CRM as an additional person. What about the team that's working with you?
Yeah, whether your team is just your CRM or you have maybe a part-time person that helps you during AEP, you want them to feel invested. So you want to, if your team is your CRM, utilize it to its fullest capacity. Mike mentioned agency blog. There is a ton of things you can do within that CRM. Honestly, a lot more than a lot of agents are even going to need. And that's a good problem to have when it comes to your team. Same thing would go for someone that you hire, whether it's an admin, full-time, part-time, or whomever it is. You want them to have a ton of tools and capabilities that you can use and you can take advantage of. And within that, invest in them, use them, let them feel like they're really a part of your agency.
I have a good friend that was an American Family agent in Kansas City. In fact, he was my agent for a long time. And one of his biggest struggles was, is him by himself in his office. He always had someone else with them. They get their P&C license, they get really good at it. They'd be offering, cross-selling life insurance and additional policies to his book of business. And the problem was upper management saw that. The regional manager was like, ooh, we need new agents. And they would pluck them out and be like, thank you. And that was his biggest challenge. Or they'd be like, I'm just sitting here making him all this money. I want to do this. And they go off on their own. So you want to make sure you give them a sense of ownership that keeps them with you and invested in your agency. But they're not going to do that unless you invest with them as well. Going back to that show, The Profit, it's funny how a lot of these small businesses will, they're talking about there's the owner, but then there's this key employee that really is the backbone of the company. And Marcus will come out of the woodwork and be like, hey, this person needs some stock in the company or needs some sort of ownership, because without them, your company fails. So if that's the case with you, maybe it's a bonus structure, maybe it's some sort of incentive, maybe you do give them a piece of the business that keeps them there. Maybe they own 5% of the business or 10% or whatever it is. Of course, talk to your CPA or some other advisor on that. But the more you invest in them, the more they feel part of the business, the better they're going to do for you. So don't treat them like employees, treat them as an investment.
Yeah, and there's an old quote that I very well may butcher, but the way I always remember it is what happens if we invest in our employees and they leave? And then the flip side is what happens if we don't invest in them and they stay? Would you rather have someone that you've invested in and they've helped your business tremendously versus someone that you were afraid to make the investment with and they stayed and end up being a drag on your profitability come into the year?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And a lot of companies don't do that. They spend all this money recruiting and hiring and going through a process, and then they're there and they're like, okay, great. And there's so many free tools and resources online that you could do that with.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, if you ever have questions, you could always call in the senior marketing specialist. We're happy to share what some of
Yep.
our top producing agencies do to keep their client, not keep their clients, but keep their staff happy and invested in the business. So, there's many different ways of doing it depending on who you hire, if they're family, if they're not family, if they're striving to become an insurance agent, maybe they don't want to be an insurance agent, they just want to be, I'm happy behind the desk as an admin, I don't want any limelight. So really knowing what they want and providing that path to them is going to be key. So I'm curious to know how many people here actually have staff versus how many are just a one agent show, because I can tell you this, I was a one agent show. Now, mind you, my wife did all my books. She did all my tracking of expenses. She did some follow up for me every now and then, but she never had her insurance license. So how many people on this call today are actually, are you solo operation again, which is fine, or are you running an agency with multiple employees, or maybe even just one employee? So let us know in the question area. And if you have questions on that, definitely let us know. Yeah, but I can tell you, I've seen, all it takes is one bad employee to really tank an agency, because they always say, what happens in the break room is just as important as what happens in the boardroom, meaning, the culture of the business is just as important as the profitability of the business. So we're seeing a lot of one-person shows here. That's great. You know what?
Mm-hmm.
If that's what you want to do, because I was a little bit of a control freak because I knew what I wanted and I didn't trust anyone else to do that. That's where your CRM comes into play, because you have full control of your
Yeah.
CRM. It doesn't do anything but what you tell it to do. So I highly, highly, highly recommend maximizing your CRM and treating it like your assistant. And you want it to do this,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to do that, and then you're done. And you don't have to worry about, again, calling in sick, expenses, or about vacations. You don't have to worry about it forgetting things unless you forget it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So make sure as a solo entrepreneur that you are taking full advantage of the tools.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't just think of agency as people with downline staff and with admins. You can be solo agent with an LLC, with a corporation, and I would still consider you an agency. So this webinar is absolutely for both ends of the spectrum. I wish I could have a system to come automate my coffee cup refill back there, or to, if I'm running low on K cups, have it just go out and get me some more. Your CRM can take care of a lot of those kinds of nitty gritty things for you if you don't want to hire a staff member.
Well, you just need to go to Amazon and look up Alexa. Oh, she just fired up. You need to look up Alexa powered coffee makers, and that dream could come
Really?
true. Stop, Alexa.
I didn't know that was the thing. So you've blown my mind today. And yeah, you might want to turn your Alexa off before it starts ordering things for you.
Oh yeah, she's really good at that. And that, I tell you what, that's so convenient. And that's another thing with your team. You want to make sure that not only for your team, but your clients, that you are convenient, because we
Yeah.
are a nation of convenience now. And that's why
Mm-hmm.
Amazon's so big, because most of the time to buy something is, it can be very complicated, or at least a multi-step process. You go to Amazon and it's like the next day you got 40 boxes showing up your door. Like, I guess I ordered all that. I don't know, because they make it so easy. It's very convenient.
Mm-hmm.
So make sure you're doing that with your agency as well. Sidebar there.
Well,
But
convenient.
along with your team, again, for the solos, I'm going to give you two stories of realtors that I'm friends with. One's named Mike, one's named Sean. Mike is a one realtor team. Well, it's him and his wife, and between them, they have one assistant that helps out. She's kind of in training to be a realtor herself. So very low expenses, has decent sales, has decent profitability. Versus Sean. Sean has a whole team of people. Like, he's got a bunch of, I think he's got like 4 admin staff, a couple of the realtors, has a full blown office, all this stuff. He has a lot more volume when it comes to real estate, but a lot less profitability because he has a lot more expenses. You know, when you hire Sean as a realtor, you get his whole team. When you hire Mike, you get Mike. It's just Mike. That's who you get. But he likes that because one, he knows that you're getting good service, and two, he gets all the profit. So two cases, there are two very different ways of going about business. No one way is right or wrong, but definitely one way can be more profitable if that's what you're going for. And I personally never really wanted to have anyone else in my agency but me. So I knew that. I knew I have to do the heavy lifting, but I knew all the profit was mine. And to me, that was far more important. Yes. So basically, I know it's a lot of information to go over today, but I'm gonna
Yeah.
go through these and will feel free to chime in. I would say next steps, focus on your cash on hand. You know, what money do you
Mm-hmm.
have in the bank, especially if you have a bad month or if something happens or a new piece of technology comes out. If you spill coffee in your computer, then what? So make sure you have plenty of cash on hand for not only operational expenses, but emergency funds as well. You know, they say when you start a business, you should have at least a year of your own salary stashed away, which I know is hard to do, but you can do over time by taking a little bit of your profit and putting it in the nest egg. The other side of that too is also talk to your CPA about how much you should be putting away for your taxes. Mine always said 20%. Take 20%, throw it in a savings account, and then at the end of the year, that was my tax fund. And you know, fingers crossed, it was me less than that, and most of the time it was. And the money left over was my bonus for the year. Sometimes it was a quarter, sometimes it was $50, but you know what? I didn't have to pay any more for taxes. Look at
Yep.
your cost per new client. And I think that is vital to look at your profitability, because if you have it will want to give you an idea on how effective your marketing is, and also give you an
Mm-hmm.
idea on should you be doing more or less of it. So how much is it
Yep.
to pick up a new client, and how much revenue are they bringing in? So if your average client's bringing in $400 of commission, but it's costing you $300 to acquire them, your first year profitability is only $100, and that can really skew the profitability margin. And that goes
Yeah,
on
I'm
to
gonna pause Mike
client.
right there for 2 seconds for a quick point.
Yeah.
You know, within tracking your cost per new client, you need to ask every single client that's new to you how they heard about you. Did they hear about you from Myrtle and her small dog spot? Was it your billboard? Did they fill out a direct mailer piece? Ask everybody how they heard about you, and that will really help you narrow down what's actually effective for your marketing.
Yes. Excellent point. And last but not least, your team, which of course, if you are a team of one, how are you holding yourself accountable? Because that, again, I've always argued and I've fought, and this is a hill I will die on, that I say overall, a lot of captive agents are more successful than independent agents because they have a hierarchy to hold them accountable, as opposed to independent agents where it's very easy to slack off. And they say a 1 week break in sales takes about 3 weeks to recover from, because by the time you revamp up your marketing, you get back in the swing of things, it could be a couple weeks later. So make sure that you are on track each and every week, or have a pipeline, or what they're saying now is a flywheel, where you get your clients involved and keep them engaged and build that momentum. You want to make sure you're doing that. And then last but not least, the organization of your clients. This is where your CRM comes into play as a solo person. Make sure that you are utilizing technology to enhance your agency, enhance your customer experience. You know, if I get an email from my agent that's brand new after 30 days checking in on me, that's a good feeling. If I never hear from them, why the heck would I refer them? You know, I always joke that an insurance agent selling insurance is not a miraculous thing. That's what's supposed to happen. You keeping in contact with me and informing me of different resources and ideas and ways to do this and this miscellaneous stuff, that's what gets referrals, not you selling the insurance policy. Because I've never referred anyone to my auto insurance company because they sold me auto insurance. That was it. I've never told my friend. I don't go to dinner parties like, you know what, I went to Progressive and they sold me insurance. And everyone's gonna be like, yeah, what do you think was gonna happen? I don't understand why you're telling me this. Same thing with you and your clients. They're not going to go brag to their friends at coffee saying, I saw an insurance agent, he sold me insurance. So you're like, Myrtle, you need to take your meds. You're obviously slipping. So now, if you told Myrtle how to save a bunch of money on prescription drugs, or told her about Zenny Optical, where she can get cheaper glasses, where I got these bad boys, that kind of stuff she can tell her friends, and they're like, oh, how'd you hear about that? Oh, my insurance agent told me. Now you're referable. So not only organize your clients in the fact that I know what they are, but when's the last time I gave them some useful information that didn't involve their checkbook?
Yep. Yeah, and if you have a Facebook page for your agency, invite every client that you can onto it. Show them, include it in your email signature. Follow me on Facebook. You can post a ton of those resources right there, so you don't have to call them and email them every time you think, ooh, I think Myrtle would appreciate Zenny Optical or a prescription savings card. You can post about it right there on your Facebook page, and it's free and easy for them to take advantage of.
So we're working on some AEP boot camps coming up. So watch the calendar for those. But we show the search history of Medicare over a 5-year period, and as you look at that graph, you can tell exactly where AEP is, because every 5 years there's a huge spike in November and December. So it kind of looks like this: November, December, November, December, November, December. 5 years. And the last 2 years, the spikes have gotten bigger. So that tells everyone that seniors are going online to find all this information. You need to be online. And Facebook has phenomenal search engine optimization, or SEO. So the more active you are on there, the more active your clients are going to see you, and the more referable again you will be. So make sure, like Will said, utilize Facebook. Don't go wide, go deep. Don't worry about Instagram or TikTok or Snapchat. Most of your clients will be on Facebook. They might be on Instagram, great, but the focus point is still going to be on Facebook. So, questions, comments, concerns. I know it's a lot of information to go through. It's also very hyper personalized in a lot of cases. If you have questions or need some further advice, please feel free to give us a call. I'm gonna put this on the screen here. There's our phone number. There's our website. You can live chat at smsteam.net. So we'll be on for another minute, answer any questions, comments, concerns, threats, or promises you may have.